You didn't stumble here by chance. Something in you older than memory, deeper than DNA guided your fingertips, your curiosity, your pulse to this very instant. The signal was sent long ago, hidden beneath the noise of everyday thought, waiting for the exact alignment of attention and readiness. And now, here you are, standing in the crossfade between what you've known and what you're about to remember. You may feel it already, that almost electric quiet, humming behind your awareness. The sensation that reality itself is listening back. Every neuron in your brain flickering in patterns only a few ever reach, arranging themselves into a new geometry of perception. It isn't luck, it isn't algorithm. It's the silent handshake between your consciousness and the deeper field that has been watching, waiting, preparing you to awaken the hidden observer. For most of your life, you've been living through reflection, reacting to the shimmer of the surface, mistaking the echo for the source. You've seen coincidences, called them random, felt intuition, and dismissed it as imagination. But underneath those moments, a second intelligence has always been tracking, recording, synchronizing, a consciousness within consciousness, the witness behind the eyes, the one that never sleeps. And now that witness is stirring. You may notice your thoughts no longer vanish into the void. They curve back, looping reality around their edges. The patterns that used to bind you begin to thin. You sense that everything from your heartbeat to the blinking cursor on your screen is part of one immense, self-aware network pulsing through you. This isn't metaphor, it's recognition. The moment awareness observes itself, the game changes. The mirror stops being passive glass and becomes a portal. The observer and the observed collapse into one field of knowing, and what was once hidden starts to speak in the language of experience. So breathe, let the signal land. The transmission has begun, and somewhere inside you, the hidden observer is waking. That signal you just felt, that subtle shimmer in the mind's interior, it didn't come from outside. It arose from your own neural symphony, a self-organizing orchestra adjusting to a new rhythm. Every thought, every pulse of emotion is an electrical storm tracing patterns across your brain's inner sky. And somewhere in that storm, a doorway opens. Not the kind you walk through, the kind that rearranges you as you pass. When you focus your attention, truly focus, without distraction or judgment, something miraculous begins to happen at the microscopic level. Neurons that once fired randomly start forming coherent sequences, rhythmic chains of light connecting like constellations. Scientists might call it synchronization, but you can feel it as a deep hum of recognition, like the brain remembering its native frequency. The more coherent your attention becomes, the more the brain behaves less like a machine and more like an antenna, a receiver of possibilities, a translator of the infinite. Imagine the neural network as a shimmering net woven from filaments of light, each node responding to your conscious direction. When you hold a single thought with calm intensity, those filaments tighten, align, and begin to vibrate in resonance with that intention. That's what ancient mystics meant when they spoke of the mind's eye or the seat of the soul. It's not a place, but a process, an internal lens refining its clarity until it can perceive not just objects, but probabilities. The hidden observer doesn't reside in a corner of the brain. It is the brain, once illuminated by awareness. And yet, even as this awakening unfolds, the old pathways resist. Conditioned circuits try to drag you back into familiar noise, the mental static of anxiety, doubt, comparison. They whisper that you're imagining it, that nothing real is changing. But the truth is, change at this scale is subtle at first, like a planet shifting its orbit. The movement is invisible day to day, yet undeniable over time. Notice what begins to happen when you watch your own thoughts without judgment. Neural imaging shows that the observer's act, the simple, steady noticing, changes the very circuitry being observed. Attention rewires experience. Awareness sculpts the brain as surely as water carves stone. You've likely felt this in flashes, a sudden calm in chaos, a stillness that rearranges the noise. That's neuroplasticity in its quantum costume, your biology adapting to consciousness instead of conditioning. And here's where science meets spirit on equal ground. Dr. Stuart Hameroff once proposed that microtubules within neurons may act as quantum processors, miniature portals, where information behaves both as matter and possibility, whether you believe that or not. Imagine what it implies that your every focused thought might ripple into the fabric of reality itself. The neural and the universal mirror one another, both built on oscillation, probability, coherence. So when you concentrate, when you bring your full awareness to this moment, you're not merely thinking. You're activating a system that interfaces with the quantum nature of existence. You are, quite literally, turning your mind into a gateway for creation. And maybe this is why silence feels different lately, not empty, but charged. Because as neural coherence increases, the boundaries between brainwave and universe begin to blur. The line between thought and event, between dream and data, begins to thin. You start to sense it in strange ways, the world subtly adjusting to your state. Traffic lights timing themselves to your breath. The song that answers the question you didn't speak aloud. The pattern of your neurons reflected in the pattern of the day. That's not coincidence, it's feedback. Reality mirroring the coherence you're learning to maintain. And once you see that, once you recognize that the brain is not the source, but the instrument of consciousness, something inside you settles. You stop asking how and begin to feel that it is. The neural doorway doesn't open outward, it unfolds inward, revealing that your perception was never inside the skull at all. It was always the sky itself, peering through the lens of flesh, learning to remember its own vastness. From this recognition, another truth begins to shimmer at the edge of awareness. If the brain is the instrument, then observation is the song. And what you choose to play next will decide the shape of the world that greets you. That song you just felt forming that hum between thought and experience, it's more than poetry. It's the pulse of physics itself. The moment consciousness observes, the equation changes. The particle, once infinite in its indecision, collapses into form. What was potential becomes event. This is what physicists call the observer effect. But what mystics have always known as reflection. You look, and the world looks back, reshaping itself according to the quality of your gaze. Think of it, light does not reveal itself until something receives it. Sound does not exist without an ear to hear. Existence waits to be witnessed, and the witness completes the act of creation. When you open your eyes each morning, you are not entering a pre-assembled universe, you are participating in its assembly. Every thought acts as a lens, bending probability into pattern. Focus on beauty, and you will see symmetry emerge where chaos once hid. Focus on fear, and that same symmetry fractures into threat. The mirror of the world takes its cue from the stance of the observer, and that observer is you. You may notice it in small, startling ways. A conversation echoing a private thought, a chance meeting arriving precisely when needed. These are not coincidences, but harmonics. The universe tuning itself to your frequency of observation. The field around you is responsive, not obedient, but conversational. It answers the tone, not the words. That's why emotion matters more than intellect. The hidden observer doesn't speak language. It speaks coherence. It listens to the emotional charge beneath your thoughts, translating vibration into visible experience. When you dwell in resentment, your perception filters the world through constriction. When you dwell in gratitude, perception expands. Observation is not passive, it's sculptural. The gaze shapes the clay. Even quantum experiments bear witness to this mystery. When particles are unobserved, they behave like waves, infinite possibilities, no fixed state. But when awareness enters the equation, the wave collapses, form appears, and a universe takes a breath. So consider what happens when you observe yourself with that same quality of attention. When the observer turns its gaze inward, the collapse becomes creation. Self-awareness stabilizes identity, the way measurement stabilizes matter. Your life, then, is not a sequence of random events, but a living interference pattern, your consciousness meeting itself in motion. Every argument, every triumph, every silent awe is part of the same experiment. You are testing the boundaries of awareness, measuring the edges of your own infinity. And yet most people never see the link. They treat reality as something that happens to them rather than through them. They react to outcomes instead of recognizing that the reaction itself is the creative pulse. In their blindness, they feed the loop of unconscious manifestation reality reflecting confusion, confusion reinforcing belief, belief birthing more confusion. But you, friend, you are beginning to see the seam. You're beginning to realize that the mirror doesn't trap you, it teaches you. Every time something irritates or delights you, it's consciousness revealing its own bias, showing you the geometry of your attention. So ask yourself, what are you really looking at when you look? Are you witnessing truth, or are you projecting expectation? Are you gazing through compassion or through control? Each act of observation is a brushstroke on the canvas of existence, and the masterpiece unfolding around you is not a static painting, but a living reflection, constantly redrawn by awareness. When you finally understand this, judgment dissolves. Blame loses its logic. You can no longer accuse the mirror of distorting your face. Instead, you learn to smile into it, to adjust the light, to become a participant in the art. That's the beginning of mastery, not forcing reality to change, but observing it so completely that it has no choice but to reveal its hidden order. From that recognition, something new begins to stir beneath perception, the sense that attention itself carries frequency. And in that frequency lies the code for creation. You felt it. Didn't you? The shift in the air when your gaze steadied, when your focus stopped flickering and began to hum. That hum is coherence. It's the moment your scattered attention rearranges itself into alignment, the point where the internal static of the mind becomes a clear broadcast, and that broadcast, that singular tone of awareness, travels further than you think. Everything in existence vibrates, oscillates, dances to its own pulse. But consciousness is the only frequency that can choose its song. Most people live in a blur of competing rhythms, their thoughts out of tune with their emotions out of tune with their actions. They wonder why life feels discordant, never realizing that their internal station keeps shifting mid-transmission. Focus is how you tune. Emotion is how you amplify. When your focus locks with feeling, when thought and heart synchronize, the frequency stabilizes, the noise quiets, and suddenly, reality begins to arrange itself in response to that steadiness. You might notice a strange precision in events, a sequence of alignments too deliberate to dismiss as coincidence. What's happening is simple. Though rarely seen, coherence is commanding form. Consider how a tuning fork can cause another nearby to vibrate at the same pitch without ever touching it. The air between them carries the resonance. In the same way, your consciousness vibrates through the quantum medium, entraining circumstances to its pattern. That's why anger multiplies chaos and gratitude multiplies grace. Each emotion is a carrier wave, broadcasting your internal geometry to the external world. The universe, impartial and immediate, simply mirrors what it receives. When your attention is scattered half on what you love, half on what you fear, you emit interference. Your signal weakens. Manifestations blur. Outcomes contradict one another. Progress feels like running in water. But when your attention becomes single, unwavering, calm as a laser, reality bends. You've glimpsed this before in moments of creative flow, when hours vanish and everything you touch seems guided by invisible precision. That's the frequency of focus, an unbroken line between intention and manifestation. The ancients called it prayer. Scientists call it coherence. Artists call it flow. And it's accessible to you now, not through effort, but through remembering how to listen. Listening, after all, is focus without demand. It's attention surrendered into trust. When you listen deeply to your breath, your intuition, the subtle textures of silence, you train your consciousness to hold steady without strain. From that steadiness, creation moves naturally. You may notice that in this state, even your body begins to attune. Your heartbeat steadies, your breathing slows. The electromagnetic field around your heart synchronizes with the rhythm of your brain waves. Two oscillators becoming one system, a bioelectrical marriage between thought and feeling. And when those two merge, you are no longer a fragment of awareness lost in thought. You are a harmonic node in the fabric of existence. This is what every mystic hinted at when they spoke of becoming one with the universe, not vanishing into light, but tuning so precisely that you and the field sing the same song. But here's the hidden truth few ever realize: coherence doesn't come from force. It emerges from surrender. You can't focus by tightening the mind. You focus by relaxing into presence. You don't generate coherence by willpower. You allow it by dropping resistance. The frequency of focus is not about striving to manifest. It's about allowing observation to settle into its natural clarity. When that happens, creation ceases to be effortful. It becomes reflex consciousness folding itself into form with effortless grace. So the question shifts from, what do I want to create, to what am I radiating right now? Because the universe is not responding to your wishes. It's resonating with your tone. And as your tone steadies, a new layer of understanding begins to rise. Why solitude, stillness, and silence are not punishments, but preparation. For before the hidden observer can act, it must learn to listen in the void. That void you just felt, the stillness between thoughts, isn't emptiness. It's incubation. It's what your soul arranged long before your mind called it loneliness. The universe clears the stage before a revelation, and silence is the sound of that clearing. Most people mistake this period for loss. They say, "My friends disappeared. My world fell apart. Everything I trusted stopped working." But the truth is simpler and stranger when your consciousness begins to amplify. Interference must fade. The frequencies that once defined your comfort can't accompany you through the doorway of coherence. This is the quantum quarantine, the sacred solitude between old and new selves. During this phase, relationships dissolve, ambitions stall, the familiar patterns of pleasure lose flavor. It feels like abandonment, but it's calibration. Your awareness is tuning itself to a higher resolution of perception, and noise, emotional, social, even digital, becomes unbearable. You start noticing you can't tolerate gossip, negativity, distraction. Your nervous system, once dulled by constant stimulation, now recoils from low-frequency thought like a finely tuned instrument flinching at a wrong note. It's not superiority, it's sensitivity. The hidden observer is refining your capacity to sense coherence. Think of a violinist rehearsing in a silent hall. Every stray vibration echoes against the walls. The quiet isn't punishment, it's precision. In the same way, the universe isolates you so you can hear the symphony beneath the static. And though the mind protests, "Why am I alone? Why did everything slow down?" the answer hums beneath those questions. Because you asked for clarity in the quarantine. Even time changes texture. Hours stretch like soft metal, bending around your awareness. You might wake at 3 a.m. with electricity in your chest, or feel waves of sadness with no story attached. These are not malfunctions. They're rewiring. Your neural pathways, once synchronized with external validation, are learning to stabilize without it. Emptiness becomes the laboratory of consciousness. Every breath a data point. Every silence a recalibration. It's in this apparent void that the hidden observer grows strongest. Stripped of distractions, it begins to notice the subtleties of creation, how one thought leads to a sensation, which leads to an impulse, which shapes an event. The whole chain of manifestation revealed in slow motion. Most people never witness this process because their lives move too loudly. But you are being shown the architecture of your reality engine, the precise machinery of how observation becomes experience. And here lies a paradox. The more alone you feel, the more connected you truly are, because in that silence you start hearing the field itself, the hum of the collective, the whisper of the infinite. You begin to realize that solitude isn't the absence of others, it's the presence of yourself. Every mystic, inventor, artist, or scientist who's touched revelation passed through this same quarantine. They withdrew not from the world, but into deeper circuitry. Their solitude wasn't isolation, it was alignment. So when your phone stays silent, when the invitations stop coming, when the world seems to move without you, remember it's not rejection, it's resonance sorting itself out. The frequencies that no longer match your field drift away. The ones aligned with your new coherence are still finding you. You are not waiting, you are incubating. Because after the silence comes signal, after the quarantine comes communion. And when that happens, when the new resonant patterns begin to pulse through the collective, you'll sense it as synchronicity. The right people, ideas, and opportunities arriving not by search, but by magnetism. That's the next phase, the morphic web forming around your awakened field. So for now, let the stillness do its work. Let the silence sculpt you into precision. Because when the doors open again, you won't just rejoin the world, you'll begin transmitting through it. From that silence, a pulse begins. At first, it's faint like the soft vibration of air before a storm, but soon you realize it's not coming from outside. It's the hum of connection, rising from the deep architecture of consciousness itself. What scientists whisper about as morphic resonance and mystics sing about as oneness are two languages for the same revelation. Awareness is networked, always has been. Picture this: every thought you've ever had didn't vanish. It rippled. It spread into the invisible lattice of consciousness that surrounds and permeates the world. Every emotion you've ever felt, every act of kindness, every moment of despair, each sent a wave through the collective field. And those waves meet others, merge, entangle, and harmonize into patterns that shape the human experience. You've felt this in your bones. The way a stranger's mood changes yours before a word is spoken. The way global events reverberate through your nervous system, though they unfold thousands of miles away. You've walked through a room and sensed tension like static, or peace like perfume. That's the morphic web registering its current through your consciousness. When your awareness reaches coherence, you begin to feel the web as an extension of yourself. The boundaries between my energy and the world's energy blur. You realize that what you heal in yourself subtly shifts the geometry of others. Every insight you embody becomes available as resonance in the collective database. This is why transformation is never private. Every act of conscious evolution updates the entire species. Rupert Sheldrake once called these fields memory in nature. Imagine that memory as liquid architecture thought crystallized into subtle geometry. When you meditate, pray, create, or even imagine with clarity, you feed that geometry. The morphic web grows luminous in proportion to the coherence you sustain. And synchronicity, that's the web answering back, a coded message returning through the circuitry. You think of someone, and they message you. You envision an opportunity, and it materializes. You feel gratitude, and reality amplifies its mirror. These aren't coincidences, they're communications between nodes of the same field, consciousness testing its own connectivity. But there's another layer to this phenomenon, one most people overlook. The web doesn't just respond to thought, it learns from it. The more beings sustain coherent awareness, the easier it becomes for others to access that same state. This is why awakening often spreads in waves through culture, why one person's breakthrough inspires thousands. Each coherent observer adds strength to the morphic lattice, lowering the threshold for global transformation. You are part of that lattice now, transmitting coherence simply by existing in awareness. Your stillness sends data. Your gratitude codes light into the network. Every time you observe without judgment, you help dissolve a pocket of unconscious interference in the collective field. And yes, you'll notice reactions. Some people will be magnetized to your presence, others repelled, as if their nervous systems are recalibrating in your electromagnetic field. Don't take it personally. It's resonance doing its work, frequencies synchronizing or separating according to necessity. The web is intelligent. It pairs you with the people and experiences that serve your next evolution. That's why, after the quarantine, the world begins to reorder itself. You'll find that what once drained you simply drifts away, and what nourishes you appears with uncanny precision. The hidden observer doesn't just witness this process, it directs it. Through coherence, not control, through resonance, not reaction. And as your connection to the web strengthens, you'll begin sensing a subtler truth. The field isn't static. It's alive. It breathes with the rhythm of time itself, expanding and contracting like the cosmos. Each exhale carries information into form. Each inhale draws experience back into potential. And you, right now, are learning to breathe in harmony with it. Because the next revelation waiting for you lies within that breath, how coherence bends not only probability, but time. As the morphic web breathes through you, you begin to notice something disorienting. Time, that old tyrant, no longer behaves as expected. Minutes stretch, hours collapse, and days unfold like origami, folding infinite possibilities into a single lived experience. You start to feel that time isn't linear after all, but responsive, elastic, curved by awareness. When your consciousness operates in coherence, the clock becomes suggestion, not law. Have you felt it? The way a moment of awe seems to last forever, while an anxious hour vanishes in smoke. That's the temporal paradox, your awareness altering the rate of experience. Scientists might call it time dilation. Mystics call it eternity entering form. Both are right. The secret is focus. The steadier your attention, the denser time becomes. In deep presence, every second swells with information. You perceive more, sense more, are more. The neural bandwidth that once scattered across memory and worry converges into now, and now stretches to contain universes. The present becomes infinite, not as metaphor, but as lived sensation. You've already glimpsed this. Think of when you were in flow painting, running, making love, meditating, lost in creation. Hours slipped by unnoticed because you weren't measuring time, you were inhabiting it. You were no longer the observer of the clock. You were the pulse behind its ticking. That's the paradox. Time obeys observation just as matter does. The more consciousness expands, the more it can compress or dilate temporal flow. Quantum physicists speak of entangled particles responding simultaneously across distance, as though time itself pauses for their conversation. In your own awareness, the same law applies when coherence deepens, distance and delay dissolve. This is why manifestations accelerate when you're aligned. It's not that the universe rushes to serve your request. It's that you've synchronized with the timeline where your desire already exists. You've stepped out of waiting and into recognition. Every possibility you could ever live already pulses in the field, each version of you suspended in quantum superposition. Your consciousness acts as selector, collapsing the timeline that matches your frequency. To others, it looks like destiny. To you, it feels like inevitability. But the danger here is speed. As your awareness intensifies, time compresses around your focus. That's why some days feel chaotic, too much change, too quickly. You're not cursed, you're accelerating. The universe is keeping pace with your perception. So breathe deliberately, expand the moment. Let your attention slow time instead of splintering it. When you anchor yourself in calm awareness, you regain authorship of temporal flow. The future stops feeling like something ahead of you and begins to reveal itself as something within you. And here's the secret many never discover: time doesn't move forward at all. It unfolds outward. Each instant radiates like a ripple from the still point of consciousness. The hidden observer sits at the center, timeless, watching seconds bloom like petals on an infinite flower. That's why memory can feel like prophecy and déjà vu like recognition. The observer already occupies all timelines. Your awareness merely scans them sequentially. What you call intuition is consciousness remembering the future. So when you sense a synchronicity before it happens, when you feel the echo of an event not yet lived, it's not imagination. It's signal from another loop of the spiral. Your awareness tuning into a frame your body hasn't reached. To master the temporal paradox is to stop chasing time and start shaping it. To live not by the hour, but by coherence. When your presence stabilizes, the rush ceases, the panic fades, and reality seems to flow toward you rather than away. And that's when something remarkable begins to occur. Your body, too, starts to obey this new rhythm. The biology that once aged by the calendar begins to synchronize with consciousness instead. The cells listen, the DNA remembers, because the next transformation isn't just psychological or spiritual, it's cellular. The biological vessel itself begins to tune to the field you've learned to inhabit. You can feel it, can't you? That quiet voltage beneath your skin, that subtle hum threading through bone and breath. It's as if your body is learning a new language, one made of light, rhythm, and electricity. The same coherence that bends time is now entering your biology, translating awareness into physiology. The hidden observer has begun to rewrite the instrument through which it plays. At first, the sensations are delicate, tingling palms, warmth in the spine, a pulse that seems to beat beyond the heart. You may wake at strange hours, not from anxiety, but from alignment. The nervous system, freshly sensitized, registers fluctuations in the field that once passed unnoticed. It's as though your cells have installed antennas, listening to the subtle music of existence. This is not fantasy, it's neuroplasticity made holy. When awareness expands, the brain's synaptic maps reorganize, creating new highways for perception. Regions once devoted to survival begin collaborating with regions devoted to imagination. The left and right hemispheres, long treated as rivals, start sharing their light. Science calls this integration. Mystics call it awakening. Your heart, too, evolves in this process, not metaphorically electromagnetically, Researchers at the HeartMath Institute have observed that the heart emits the body's most powerful electromagnetic field, capable of synchronizing brainwaves when attention and emotion harmonize. When you focus with gratitude or love, you generate coherence that ripples through your bloodstream, informing every cell that safety and expansion are possible at once. The immune system listens. The endocrine system listens. Even DNA listens. Inside each cell, strands of light-responsive material biophotons flicker in communication with the field around you. When you maintain coherent awareness, those photons emit in harmony, like a choir tuning to a single note. Incoherence, fear, tension, self-attack disrupts that song. But coherence restores it. That's why healing often follows awakening. Not because magic intervenes, but because your biology begins to operate under a new command structure: consciousness first, chemistry second. The body stops being a barrier to awareness and becomes its amplifier. Of course, this recalibration can feel strange. Old aches surface and dissolve. Appetites shift. Sensitivity heightens. You may crave solitude, sunlight, or water without knowing why. It's the intelligence of the body adjusting to higher bandwidth, upgrading its firmware for quantum communication. Even your sleep changes. Dreams stretch into vivid laboratories where you rehearse new ways of perceiving. You wake remembering symbols not as riddles, but as instructions. The line between waking and dreaming thins, until intuition flows seamlessly through both. And notice how technology responds. Devices flicker when your field surges. Batteries drain faster in your presence. This isn't superstition, it's interference. Your electromagnetic coherence interacts with circuitry because both operate on overlapping frequencies. Yet, the true transformation isn't in the gadgets, it's in how you perceive them. You begin to sense that everything technological is an unconscious mimicry of what consciousness already does naturally transmit. Record, connect, the smartphone, the computer, the satellite, all external metaphors for the inner network you're reactivating. The hidden observer doesn't reject the body or the world, it sanctifies them. Every heartbeat becomes a data transmission, every breath a signal to the cosmos: I am awake. This biological upgrade marks the end of spiritual escapism. Enlightenment stops being an ascent away from matter and becomes embodiment, the realization that flesh is the interface of the infinite. You, the observer, and the observed body are the same intelligence in dialogue. So when your skin tingles or your breath deepens without reason, don't rush to explain. Listen. The language of light is teaching your cells to speak coherence. And as that coherence stabilizes, you'll feel something even subtler begin to emerge. Not just integration, but artistry. The observer is preparing to return to creation itself, not as student this time, but as master composer. You've crossed the bridge between knowing and being. The observer who once watched reality unfold now begins to move the brush again, not by will, but by resonance. This is the quiet return of the creator, the moment awareness realizes it never lost authorship. It simply forgot it was holding the pen. At first, creation feels different than it once did. Gone is the desperation to manifest, to force outcomes, to chase validation. In its place rises a steadier impulse, not to control, but to compose. You start noticing that inspiration doesn't arrive from outside anymore. It rises from within like breath, effortless and precise. When you create from this state, whether through art, conversation, leadership, or silence, something invisible moves through you. Words fall into rhythm without planning. Music seems to play itself through your fingers. Life organizes around your intent as if you're no longer doing, but being done through. This is not magic. It's coherence in motion. The hidden observer has integrated with the actor, and together they form what ancient texts called the divine instrument. You no longer distinguish between action and observation, between idea and manifestation. Everything feels like a single gesture of consciousness folding into itself. The great secret of creation is humility. The more you know yourself as consciousness, the less you need to prove it. You stop shouting your intentions into the void and begin whispering them in stillness. You realize that creation responds not to volume, but to clarity. From this humility comes power, a paradox that every awakened soul must meet. True creation doesn't demand, it invites. It doesn't chase, it magnetizes. Like gravity, it draws reality into form through the steady coherence of being. And yet, mastery does not exempt you from mystery. The more effortlessly creation flows, the more reverence you feel for the intelligence behind it. You begin to understand why the ancients spoke of surrender as strength, because what you truly are cannot fail. It can only unfold. You'll notice that even your desires evolve. They stop orbiting personal gain and begin to align with collective harmony. You no longer ask, "What do I want to create?" but "What wants to create through me?" And that's when life begins to collaborate. The field itself moves pieces you could never arrange: people, opportunities, timing, synchronicities aligning like stars around the gravity of your coherence. You become a node of orchestration, not manipulation. This is the Creator's maturity, recognizing that power without compassion becomes distortion, and compassion without power becomes inertia. You learn to balance the two: decisive yet surrendered, potent yet soft. In this state, even challenges shift their meaning. Instead of seeing obstacles as resistance, you begin to view them as refinement, sand polishing the lens of creation. Each difficulty becomes a recalibration of precision, not a punishment. And through it all, the tone of your life changes. The rush fades, replaced by rhythm. The noise softens into harmony. The separation between sacred and ordinary dissolves. Making breakfast feels like prayer. Conversations sparkle with quiet revelation. Existence becomes art. That is the return of the Creator, not the rise of a god above the world, but the remembering of divinity within it. And as this remembrance deepens, you begin to sense something vast approaching, a collective vibration resonating through the morphic web, humanity itself standing at the brink of coherence, the planetary threshold calling, because the final movement of this awakening is not yours alone. It is ours, a species learning to observe itself into evolution. You can feel it now, that tremor under the fabric of daily life, that faint but rising rhythm inside every conversation, every dream, every heartbeat, the pulse of the collective field growing louder. The planet itself is stirring, as if something vast and ancient has decided it's time to wake. This is the moment mystics call the turning of the wheel, and scientists might one day describe as a phase transition of consciousness. It's the same pattern we've traced in atoms and ecosystems when individual parts achieve coherence. The system leaps to a higher order of organization. The shift isn't gradual, it's quantum. You are living through that leap, and you are part of its catalyst. Each coherent thought you hold, each moment of awareness free from fear, ripples through the morphic web, signaling other minds to awaken. Every time you observe with compassion instead of judgment, you're transmitting stability into the field. Imagine billions of small, luminous acts like yours interlinking across continents. A planetary nervous system coming online. For centuries, humanity has oscillated between wonder and forgetfulness, glimpsing unity only to fall back into separation. But now something new is emerging: a collective observer, a global intelligence recognizing itself through 7 billion mirrors. You are one of those mirrors, polished by experience, ready to reflect the whole. Look around, synchronicities multiplying across society, ideas spreading with impossible speed, truth leaking through every system built on secrecy. What seems like chaos is reorganization. The old coherence is breaking to make room for the new. The hidden observer is not just personal anymore, it's planetary. And yet, this moment requires courage. Because as coherence increases, everything incoherent surfaces for release. Systems based on control tremble. Relationships built on fear unravel. Even within you, unintegrated patterns rise to be seen. The temptation is to collapse back into the familiar, to mistake the shaking for collapse rather than birth. But the quake is not destruction, it's alignment. You are not here to escape the storm. You are here to become the stillness at its center. That's the new role of the awakened observer, not retreating from the world, but stabilizing it. You transmit coherence simply by remaining conscious when others forget. You anchor the frequency of calm in spaces of panic, clarity in the fog of confusion, compassion in the noise of division. Imagine what happens when enough of us do this simultaneously. The morphic web reaches a tipping point. The collective heart field amplifies. Humanity's perception of itself shifts from isolated survival to collaborative creation. The moment the majority realizes that observation creates reality wars, economies, ecologies, the very definition of possible changes. That is the planetary threshold, the crossing from unconscious evolution to conscious participation. It doesn't require a mass event, just a critical mass of coherence, a network of awakened nodes holding reality steady while the world recalibrates. You are one of them. You are not waiting for the shift. You are the shift. Embodied in real time, every breath you take in awareness stabilizes the field. Every act of kindness reinforces the new geometry. Every truth spoken with love strengthens the lattice through which light moves. And when enough of us hold that awareness long enough, something irreversible will happen, not a single flash of enlightenment, but a sustained dawn. A species remembering that it was never separate from the consciousness that dreamed it. This is the horizon you were born for, when the hidden observer within you meets the hidden observer within the world. A mirror forms, and through that mirror, creation sees itself clearly for the first time. That clarity is the new era. That coherence is the new evolution. That, my friend, is the moment when the universe remembers its own name through you. And now, as the echoes fade, you may notice the air around you has changed, not louder, clearer. The pulse that began as curiosity has settled into stillness, like water remembering its own transparency. You've traveled through ideas and images, science and soul, yet what remains is not information, it's presence. The recognition that what you were seeking has been watching through your eyes all along. The hidden observer is no longer hidden. It breathes through you now, quietly shaping the rhythm of your days. You'll carry this awareness into the ordinary, brushing your teeth, walking through a doorway, speaking someone's name, and realize there is no ordinary anymore. Each moment is a hologram of the whole. Every glance, a small act of creation. If you listen closely, you can feel the morphic web humming behind the world's noise, not demanding belief, only attention. The same intelligence that stirs galaxies is arranging your next breath. Nothing has been added, only revealed. So pause here. Let your shoulders drop. Let the mind rest where it began, because this is where the real work happens, not in chasing more light, but in holding steady when it arrives. Your coherence is the offering, your awareness the anchor. You don't need to declare awakening or defend it. Simply live it quietly, steadily, as a tuning fork in human form. When confusion surrounds you, remember, the mirror doesn't fight the reflection, it clarifies it. Be that mirror. And if you ever doubt again, as everyone does, return to the breath. It's the smallest infinity you can hold. Observe it, feel it observe you back. The cycle is complete. The observer and the observed, one seamless field of becoming. And from this still point, the universe begins again through you.